I told myself it was a practical decision. 7 days, good money, no emotional involvement. That was how I framed it when I accepted the offer. Sitting alone at my kitchen table with overdue bills spread out like quiet accusations. I needed something stable, even if temporary. My name is Lena Moore, and at that moment, survival felt more urgent than dignity. Saying yes felt simple, almost harmless. I had no idea it would fracture the version of myself I was clinging to. The yacht waited for me at the marina just after dusk, impossibly white against the dark water, lights glowing low and warm like a secret. The air smelled of salt, diesel, and something faintly floral from the polished wood inside. When I stepped aboard, the sounds of the city fell away all at once. No traffic, no voices. Just water brushing the hull and the quiet thrum of engines resting. The silence pressed in, not empty, but expectant. That was when I met Victoria Hale, billion-dollar CEO, media phantom. She stood barefoot on the deck, wearing linen, her posture relaxed but unreadable. She didn't smile. She didn't rush to greet me. She simply studied me, her gaze steady, intelligent, unsettlingly attentive. When she spoke my name softly, it felt like she had already memorized things about me I hadn't said out loud. I told myself I didn't belong here, that I was a visitor passing through someone else's reality. Yet every shared silence felt deliberate. Every moment of proximity, passing too close in the narrow corridor, catching the warmth of her skin as she leaned past me, made my thoughts blur at the edges. I was used to being invisible. Victoria didn't look through me, she looked at me, and that alone was destabilizing. It was supposed to be 7 days. That was the contract. But standing there, surrounded by open water and unspoken tension, I sensed the truth before it was named. This wasn't an arrangement. It was the beginning of something neither of us had planned. And when Victoria finally looked at me and said quietly, "Stay with me," I knew nothing in my life would return to its original shape. Subscribe to the channel and comment your city and country if you want the full story. The first night on the yacht, I didn't unpack. I told myself it was temporary thinking, like if I never put my clothes in drawers, none of this could fully claim me. My suitcase stayed closed at the foot of the bed, leather still cool from the air-conditioned cabin. The room smelled faintly of citrus and clean fabric, the kind of scent designed to suggest ease. I sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the water shift against the hull, feeling the quiet press against my ribs. Victoria Hale had retired to her cabin without ceremony, no instructions, no schedule. Just a brief glance in my direction, measured and unreadable, before she disappeared down the corridor. That should have made things easier. Instead, it left a vacuum I didn't know how to stand in. I wandered up to the deck, drawn by the night air, by the need to feel something real against my skin. The ocean was darker than I expected, a flat expanse of moving black broken only by reflections from the yacht's lights. The breeze carried salt and something metallic, sharp enough to wake me up from the fog I'd been living in for months. I wrapped my arms around myself. Not cold, exactly, just unanchored. I kept thinking about the way Victoria had said my name earlier. Not warmly, not coldly, like a fact she intended to remember. I didn't hear her approach. One moment I was alone, the next she was there, standing a careful distance away. She'd changed. Simple black top, hair loose now, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The shift made her feel less like the woman from headlines and more like someone unguarded, though I suspected that was an illusion she'd perfected. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head. Too quiet. She considered that, her gaze drifting back toward the water. "Most people say the opposite." "I'm not most people," I said before I could stop myself. The words hung there, honest in a way I hadn't planned. Her mouth curved. Not a smile exactly, but something close enough to unsettle me. "Neither am I," she replied. We stood like that for a while, side by side, not touching. The space between us felt intentional, charged. I was acutely aware of her presence, the warmth she gave off, the subtle rhythm of her breathing. Every instinct told me to step back, to restore the distance that made sense. I didn't move. She asked me about my work, my life, but not in the way people usually do, skimming for polite answers. She listened, really listened. When I spoke, she watched my face, my hands, as if the words themselves were only part of the story. I found myself telling her things I hadn't planned to share, how tired I was, how I felt like I'd been improvising adulthood without a script. At some point, the yacht shifted direction. The engines deepened their hum, the deck tilting just enough that my balance faltered. Without thinking, Victoria reached out. Her hand closed around my wrist, firm, steady. The contact was brief, necessary. Still, my pulse jumped in a way that felt disproportionate to the moment. "Careful," she said softly. Her hand lingered half a second longer than required, long enough for me to notice the heat of her skin, long enough for something unspoken to pass between us. Then she let go, as if releasing me from a thought we both pretended not to have. "I didn't hire you to be uncomfortable," she said after a pause. "If at any point you want to leave, say so." I nodded, though the words didn't feel true. I didn't want to leave. That realization landed quietly, but it stayed. The idea frightened me more than the job ever had. When she turned to go, I watched her walk away, posture composed, steps unhurried. The night seemed to close in after her, the deck suddenly larger, emptier. I stood there long after she was gone, aware of a shift inside me that had nothing to do with money or contracts. 7 days, I reminded myself. Just 7 days. But even then, I knew I was already counting wrong. I woke before sunrise, disoriented by how still everything felt. No sirens, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just the soft vibration beneath the floor, steady and low, like a heartbeat I hadn't known I was listening for. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then the memory returned in fragments. White deck lights, salt in the air, Victoria's hand around my wrist. The thought tightened something in my chest. I showered slowly, letting the warm water ground me. The bathroom was all marble and muted light, the mirror slightly fogged, my reflection unfamiliar in this setting. I looked like someone who belonged to a different life. I dressed simply, linen pants, a soft top, trying not to look like I was trying. My suitcase stayed closed. I told myself it was because I liked things neat. I didn't examine that lie too closely. Breakfast was set on the upper deck. Fresh fruit, coffee that smelled impossibly rich, pastries still warm. Victoria was already there, seated with a tablet beside her, hair pulled back loosely, sunglasses resting on the table. She looked up when she heard me approach, her expression neutral but attentive, as if she'd been waiting without admitting it. "Good morning, Lena," she said. The way she said my name, clear, unhurried, made me feel suddenly awake. I returned the greeting and sat across from her, careful not to assume familiarity. The table between us felt like a border. She gestured for me to eat, then returned to her screen, though I noticed she didn't touch it again for a while. We talked about practical things, the route, the weather, the crew. She explained expectations without condescension, her tone precise but not cold. I realized quickly that control came naturally to her, not as dominance, but as clarity. It made people want to follow. I wondered how many times in her life she'd mistaken that for connection. Later, she invited me to walk the deck with her. The sun was higher now, light scattering across the water, the yacht cutting through it with quiet confidence. The heat built slowly, the kind that settled into your skin rather than pressing down. We walked side by side, close enough that our arms almost brushed, close enough that I could feel the rhythm of her stride without matching it. "You're tense," she said suddenly, not looking at me. I laughed softly, more reflex than humor. "I don't usually spend mornings on private yachts with women I've only met once." "Fair," she replied. Then, after a pause, "You don't have to perform here." The word landed deeper than she probably intended. Perform. I'd been doing that my whole life, adjusting, smoothing, becoming what a room required. I glanced at her, wondering how much she saw. Her face was calm, but her attention felt sharp, present. As the day unfolded, time behaved strangely. We moved through shared spaces without friction. Lunch, a quiet stretch where she worked, and I read nearby, the gentle choreography of proximity. Sometimes we spoke, sometimes we didn't. The silences were not empty, they held shape, meaning. I caught myself listening for her breathing when she sat too close, aware of the heat where our legs nearly touched. In the afternoon, the sea shifted. The water grew rougher, the horizon uneven. The yacht adjusted, smooth but unmistakable. I gripped the railing instinctively. Victoria noticed immediately. "Come inside," she said, placing a hand at the small of my back. Not pushing, just guiding. The touch was brief, professional in intent. Still, my body reacted before my mind could correct it. The warmth lingered, spreading. Inside, the air was cooler, dimmer. She stepped back, giving me space, watching to make sure I was steady. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Then, more honestly, I think so. She nodded, as if that answer mattered. We stood there a moment too long, neither of us moving. The yacht rolled gently beneath us, the world outside narrowing to this quiet, suspended space. I was aware of everything, her proximity, the way her gaze softened when it met mine, the faint citrus scent of her skin. She broke the moment first, clearing her throat. Dinner's informal tonight, no obligations. Okay, I said, though my voice felt different now, lower, less certain. That evening I lay in my cabin with the lights off, listening to the water, replaying the day in fragments. Nothing had happened, and yet everything felt altered. The contract sat on the desk, unchanged. 7 days, clear terms. But the truth pressed in quietly, insistently. I wasn't here just to accompany her. I was here because something in me had already begun to answer something in her, and it scared me how little I wanted to stop it. The third day began with rain, not the dramatic kind. No thunder, no sharp wind, just a soft, persistent fall that turned the deck slick and the air dense. The sky blurred into the sea, everything washed into the same muted gray. I watched it from the window of my cabin, coffee warming my hands, feeling oddly exposed despite the glass between me and the world. When I stepped into the common area, Victoria was already there. She stood near the window, phone in hand, her posture unmistakably tense. She ended the call as I entered, her expression resetting into something composed but brittle around the edges. "Work?" I asked, immediately regretting the question. She considered me for a moment, then nodded. "Always." There was an invitation in that single word. Not to ask more, but to understand the weight of it. I didn't push. Instead, I moved to the counter, poured myself another cup of coffee, and waited. Silence had become our shared language. We were both fluent in it. Breakfast passed quietly. The rain softened the world outside, dampening sound, closing us in. The crew moved efficiently, nearly invisible. At some point, the yacht adjusted course, the motion subtle but constant, like a thought you couldn't quite finish. I felt it in my balance, in the way the floor seemed to breathe beneath my feet. Later, Victoria suggested we stay inside. The decks were slippery, the wind unpredictable. We settled into the lounge, low light, clean lines, the faint scent of leather and salt carried in on our clothes. She sat across from me at first, laptop open, fingers moving quickly. I pretended to read, though my attention kept drifting to the crease between her brows, the way her jaw tightened when she concentrated. "You can stop pretending," she said without looking up. I smiled despite myself. "Am I that obvious?" "Yes," she replied, then softened it with a glance. "But it's not unwelcome." That did something to me. Unwelcome. I shifted slightly, setting the book aside. The rain intensified, tapping against the windows in uneven rhythm. The space felt smaller now, compressed by weather and quiet. She closed the laptop after a while and leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I'm not good at this part," she said. "Which part?" I asked. "The unscheduled moments," she said. "The ones without objectives." I studied her face, really studied it. For all her control, there was a vulnerability there she didn't bother hiding. It wasn't weakness. It was fatigue. The kind that comes from being seen only for what you can provide. "I think," I said carefully, "you're better at it than you think." Her gaze met mine, sharp and searching. For a moment, I thought she might dismiss the comment. Instead, she nodded once, as if filing it away. The yacht rolled more noticeably then, the rain turning heavier, the sea less forgiving. I felt the shift and instinctively braced myself. Victoria noticed immediately, her attention snapping back into focus. "Come closer," she said, standing. "It's steadier here." I hesitated only a second before moving toward her. The space between us closed, not touching, just close enough that I could feel the heat of her body, the subtle scent of her perfume mixed with something unmistakably her. She placed a hand on the back of the sofa, steadying herself, her other hand hovering near my elbow without making contact. "You're doing that thing again," she murmured. "What thing?" Thinking 3 steps ahead, I laughed softly, the sound surprising me. "Occupational hazard. Try this," she said, her voice lower now. "Just stand." I did. The yacht moved beneath us, a slow, rolling motion that required attention but not effort. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. My awareness narrowed to sensation. The floor, the rain, the warmth beside me. I became acutely conscious of my breathing, of how closely hers matched mine without intention. Her hand brushed my arm then. Accidental, I told myself, necessary. Still, my skin reacted as if it had been waiting. She didn't pull away immediately. The contact lingered just long enough to register. I don't usually let people this close, she said quietly. I know, I replied, and I did. Somehow, I did. She turned slightly, facing me now. The rain softened the light, casting her features into something gentler. Her gaze dropped, not to my lips, not quite, but to the space just below my face, as if she were measuring the distance between restraint and impulse. We stood there, suspended. The world outside blurred into sound and motion, irrelevant. Everything that mattered existed in that narrow space between us, charged and unresolved. I felt the pull of it in my chest, in the way my thoughts slowed, sharpened. Then she stepped back, just one step, enough to restore balance, enough to remind us both of where we were. I should check on something, she said, already turning away. Of course, I replied, though my voice betrayed me slightly. She left the room without looking back. I remained where I was, the echo of her presence still pressing in. My arm tingled where she'd touched me, the sensation disproportionate, undeniable. That night, as the rain eased and the sea calmed, I lay awake replaying the moment again and again. Not what had happened, but what hadn't. The restraint, the choice. The fragile line we were both pretending was still intact. 7 days, I reminded myself. But the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. We were no longer waiting for something to happen. We were deciding quietly whether to let it. By the 4th morning, the rain had passed, leaving the air clear and sharp, the sky rinsed pale blue. Sunlight slipped through the windows in clean bands, warming the floors, touching everything with a kind of tentative optimism. I woke earlier than usual, restless, my thoughts already ahead of me. Something had shifted the night before. Not broken, not crossed, but stretched. I felt it in my body, a quiet alertness I couldn't turn off. I found Victoria in the galley, sleeves rolled up, hair loosely tied back. She was making coffee herself, an uncharacteristically ordinary act that made the space feel smaller, more human. For a second, she didn't notice me. I watched the way she moved, precise even in casual moments, as if efficiency had become muscle memory. When she finally looked up, her expression softened in a way that felt unguarded. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied, aware of how close I was standing, aware of how neither of us commented on it. We drank our coffee in near silence, leaning against opposite counters. The yacht cut smoothly through the water, the motion gentle now, almost soothing. Sunlight reflected off the sea, casting moving patterns on the ceiling. I noticed how her gaze followed those reflections, thoughtful, distant. "Do you ever stop?" I asked, surprising myself. She considered the question, then shook her head slightly. "I slow down," she said. "Stopping feels irresponsible." "To whom?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, something unreadable passing between us. "Everyone," she said finally, "including myself." Later that morning, she suggested we anchor near a small cove. The water there was calmer, the color shifting from deep blue to something lighter, inviting. The decision felt impulsive, unplanned in a way that echoed her confession earlier. I watched as the crew moved efficiently, and when everything settled, a stillness fell over the yacht that felt almost sacred. She invited me to sit with her on the lower deck, shaded and quiet. The cushions were warm from the sun, the air carrying a faint scent of salt and sunscreen. We sat angled toward each other, knees nearly touching. I could feel the heat from her leg, steady and present. "You're quieter today," she said. "I'm thinking," I replied. "Dangerous," she said lightly, but her eyes stayed serious. I smiled, then let it fade. "I'm trying to remember when things started feeling this close." Her gaze didn't waver. "And?" "I think it was before we noticed." She nodded once, slow. "That's usually how it happens." A breeze lifted, stirring loose strands of her hair. Without thinking, I reached out and tucked one behind her ear. The gesture was small, instinctive. And the second it registered, I froze. Her breath caught. Not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Her eyes searched my face, not accusing, not alarmed. Curious, grounded. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned subtly into the touch, as if testing it, acknowledging it without naming it. My hand lingered, fingers warm against her skin. "We should be careful," she said quietly. I know, I replied. And I did. But knowing didn't feel like stopping. She reached up then, her hand brushing my wrist, not to remove it, just to feel it there. The contact sent a slow, deliberate awareness through me, grounding and disorienting all at once. The world seemed to narrow to that single point of connection. The sound of footsteps on the deck above broke the moment. We both withdrew at the same time. The choreography seamless, practiced. The spell dissolved, leaving behind a charged quiet that settled deep in my chest. That afternoon passed with deliberate normalcy. Work calls, reading, separate spaces. We were careful, almost meticulous, in restoring boundaries. Yet every shared glance carried residue. Every silence felt heavier with what we weren't saying. As evening approached, the sky softened into gold and pink. The water reflected it all back, endless and calm. We found ourselves standing at the railing together again, the habit forming without discussion. She stood close enough that our arms brushed occasionally with the movement of the yacht. Each time it happened, neither of us moved away. I don't invite people into my life like this, she said suddenly. I know, I replied. She turned to face me fully now, her expression open, unarmored. If this becomes complicated? It already is, I said gently. A breath of laughter escaped her, quiet and surprised. Yes, she agreed, it is. We stood there as the sun dipped below the horizon, the last light catching in her eyes. I felt the pull of something inevitable. Not urgent, not reckless, but steady, like a tide that didn't announce itself, just kept rising. That night, in my cabin, I finally opened my suitcase. I placed my clothes in the drawers slowly, deliberately. Each folded piece felt like a small admission. Not of intention, but of presence. 7 days, the contract said. But somewhere between the rain and the sunlit cove, between restraint and instinct, I had begun to understand the truth. This wasn't about how long I would stay. It was about how deeply I was already in. The 5th day arrived quietly, almost deceptively normal. The sea was calm, the sky wide and pale, the kind of morning that suggested balance. I woke with a strange sense of resolve, as if something in me had settled overnight. Not certainty, nothing that clean, but readiness, the kind that comes when you stop pretending you're not already moving toward something. Victoria was on a call when I found her, voice low, controlled, speaking in short, decisive sentences. I lingered at the edge of the room, giving her space. She noticed me anyway. She always did. Her eyes flicked up briefly, then softened, just a fraction, before returning to the conversation. The gesture was small, almost invisible. It meant everything. When the call ended, she exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I'm sorry, she said. That was supposed to be quick. It's okay, I replied. And it was. The apology felt unnecessary, but telling. She wasn't used to accounting for her time with anyone. We ate lunch together later, the table set casually, no ceremony. The crew had learned our rhythms by now. When to disappear, when to remain at a distance. The familiarity made me uneasy in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. Familiarity meant roots, it meant expectation. You've changed, Victoria said suddenly, mid-conversation. I looked up, startled. How so? She tilted her head, studying me with that same careful attention that had undone me from the start. You're more present, she said. Less guarded. I considered that. The truth of it settled slowly. I think I stopped waiting for this to end. Her gaze held mine, steady and intent. That's dangerous, she said softly. I know, I replied, but it's also honest. She didn't argue. Instead, she nodded once, as if accepting the terms of a reality neither of us had planned. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was deliberate. Chosen. That afternoon, she asked if I wanted to swim. The suggestion felt intimate, not because of proximity, but because of what it implied. Leisure without agenda. Time unmeasured. I agreed before my thoughts could catch up. The water was cool at first, then welcoming. We kept our distance, moving parallel, the yacht a quiet presence behind us. Sunlight fractured across the surface, the world narrowing to sensation. Movement, breath, the sound of water breaking around my shoulders. I felt unburdened in a way that surprised me. At some point, I floated on my back, eyes closed. When I opened them, Victoria was closer than before, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name. You trust easily, she said. I didn't, I corrected. I'm learning. She nodded, thoughtful. So am I. We returned to the yacht without speaking, the shared quiet feeling earned rather than imposed. As we dried off on the deck, wrapped in towels, our proximity felt different now. Less charged, more intimate. The tension hadn't vanished, it had transformed. That evening we shared a bottle of wine, sitting on the deck as the light faded. The conversation drifted to childhood, to mistakes, to things we'd wanted and not allowed ourselves to need. She spoke about responsibility like it was a language she'd been raised in. I spoke about adaptation, about becoming what circumstances required. At some point, she said quietly, you forget who you were before. I met her gaze. Unless someone reminds you, the look she gave me then was unguarded, open, vulnerable in a way that felt intentional. She didn't reach for me. She didn't need to. The connection had settled into something deeper, something steadier. Later, as night closed in and the stars emerged, she stood and offered her hand, not as an invitation, but as a question. Walk with me, she said. I took it. Her hand was warm, familiar now. The contact didn't startle me. It grounded me. We moved slowly along the deck, the world quiet around us, the yacht carrying us forward without urgency. I don't know what this becomes, she said after a while. Neither do I replied. She squeezed my hand once, gentle but sure. But I don't want to pretend it's nothing. I wouldn't let you, I said. We stopped then, facing the water, our reflections fractured by light and movement. I felt the weight of the moment, not heavy, but meaningful. A hinge, a turning point. 5 days in. And for the first time, I realized the question wasn't whether I would stay. It was whether either of us would be willing to change if I did. The 6th day carried a different weight. Not heavier, sharper. Like the air before a storm that may never come. I felt it as soon as I woke, a low awareness humming beneath everything else. The yacht moved steadily, the sea calm, indifferent to whatever shift was unfolding between us. Victoria was already up. I found her on the upper deck, laptop open, posture immaculate, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She looked like herself again, the woman who commanded rooms without raising her voice. The contrast unsettled me more than I expected. I lingered at a distance, unsure whether to approach. She noticed, of course. Come sit, she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. I did, the familiar closeness returning without effort. For a while we said nothing. She worked. I watched the horizon. The silence felt intentional but strained, like we were both aware of a conversation waiting just beneath the surface. I leave tomorrow, she said suddenly, without looking at me. The words landed cleanly, efficiently. Too efficiently. I know, I replied. The contract echoed in my mind, clear and unyielding. 7 days. End date already circled. I'll have meetings in Monaco, she continued, then Paris, then New York, a life in motion. A future already mapped. I nodded, unsure what response she wanted, or if she wanted one at all. You could extend, she added, quieter now. If you wanted. I turned to her then, really looked. The sunglasses were gone, her gaze exposed and searching. The offer wasn't professional. Not anymore. It wasn't even persuasive. It was honest in a way that demanded the same in return. That changes things, I said. Yes, she replied. That's why I didn't say it sooner. I considered the water stretching endlessly ahead of us. Freedom had always meant mobility to me. Being able to leave before needing anything, staying felt like a different kind of risk. One I wasn't sure I knew how to take. I don't want to be another convenience, I said carefully. Her expression tightened, not defensively, but with recognition. You wouldn't be, she said. You're already not. The certainty in her voice undid me more than hesitation would have. I stood, needing space, air, distance from the gravity of the moment. She didn't stop me. She understood that too. I spent the afternoon alone, walking the deck, letting the sun and wind steady me. I thought about who I'd been before the yacht, before Victoria. About how easily I'd learned to disappear when things became complicated. About how rare it was to feel truly seen, and how frightening that visibility could be. At sunset, she found me again at the railing. No agenda, no preamble. I'm not asking you to choose me, she said. I'm asking you not to lie to yourself. The simplicity of it caught me off guard. I turned to face her, the light softening her features, the sea reflecting gold behind her. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. Her smile was faint, real. Neither do I. She reached out then, fingers brushing mine, not claiming, not demanding, just present. I let my hand rest there, the contact grounding, steady. We stood like that as the light faded, the future undefined, the moment suspended. The yacht carried us forward, indifferent, faithful to its course. That night, I didn't sleep much. I packed slowly, deliberately, folding each piece of clothing with care. When the suitcase was closed again, it felt heavier, not with weight, but with meaning. 6 days down. And for the first time, leaving didn't feel like relief, it felt like loss waiting to happen. The 7th morning arrived without ceremony. No dramatic sky, no symbolic weather, just clean light spilling across the deck, and the quiet efficiency of a vessel preparing to dock. I woke before my alarm, already aware of the shift in the yacht's movement, the subtle change in rhythm that meant arrival. Endings don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they just start happening. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that felt like me, whatever that meant now. My suitcase waited by the door, closed, deliberate. When I stepped out, the air smelled different. Less salt, more land. The horizon held shapes instead of possibility. I found Victoria standing alone at the bow, coat draped over her shoulders, hair loose and stirred by the breeze. She didn't turn when she heard me approach. "I didn't want the crew to tell you," she said. "I wanted it to be quiet." "I appreciate that," I replied. We stood side by side, not touching. The distance felt intentional this time, not charged, but respectful. The marina came into clearer view, white lines and glass buildings reflecting the morning sun. Normal life, waiting patiently. "I've been thinking," she said, "about patterns." I smiled faintly. "That sounds dangerous." She glanced at me then, something like a smile answering mine. "I'm very good at designing outcomes," she continued, "at anticipating reactions. But this," she gestured vaguely between us, "doesn't fit any model I know." "That's not a flaw," I said. "It's just unfamiliar." She nodded slowly. "Unfamiliar usually makes me want control." "And now?" I asked. "And now," she said quietly, "I want honesty more." The yacht eased closer to the dock. Ropes were readied. Voices carried faintly from the crew, careful to give us space without being asked. I felt the moment narrowing, condensing into something fragile and exact. "I meant what I said yesterday," she added. "I'm not asking you to choose me," I met her gaze. "But you are asking me to stay." She didn't deny it. "Yes." The simplicity of the admission settled between us. No pressure, no bargaining. Just truth, offered without armor. I thought about the life waiting for me beyond the dock, the familiar instability, the freedom that came from not being needed. I thought about how often I'd mistaken absence for independence. "I don't want to disappear again," I said finally. "Not into someone else's life, not into my own." Her expression softened, not relief, not triumph, understanding. "Then don't," she said. "Stay as yourself." The yacht docked fully, the engines powered down, the world clicked back into place. This was the moment where choices usually hid behind logistics, where people deferred decisions until later. I looked at my suitcase, then at her. 7 days, I said softly. "Yes," she replied. That was the agreement. I stepped closer, closing the distance deliberately, not impulsively, not out of fear. "Agreements can end," I said. "So can roles." Her breath shifted. "And what about us?" I considered the question, the real one underneath it. "I don't know what we are yet," I said. "But I know what I don't want to be." She nodded once, eyes steady. "That's enough for me." I reached for her hand then, not tentative, not rushed. She took it without hesitation, her grip warm, grounding. The contact felt like punctuation. Not the end of a sentence, but the start of a new one. The crew approached discreetly, waiting for instruction. Victoria turned to them, composed as ever. "We'll be delayed," she said simply. "Clear my schedule." They didn't question it. They never did. She turned back to me, something unguarded in her expression. "There's a hotel nearby," she said. "If you want space, time." I shook my head. "I don't need distance," I said. "I need intention." Her smile this time was real, unhidden. "Then stay," she said again. Not as an order, not as a request, as an offering. I didn't answer with words. I answered by stepping forward, suitcase still by the door, hand still in hers, choosing presence over escape for the first time in longer than I could remember. 7 days had brought me here. Not to a decision that ended anything, but to one that finally began. Staying didn't feel dramatic. That surprised me. There was no rush of adrenaline, no cinematic swell of certainty, just a quiet click inside my chest, like something aligning after being slightly off for years. The crew moved around us with professional ease, adjusting plans without comment. The yacht remained docked, steady, as if it too had decided to pause. Victoria suggested we go ashore, not to celebrate, not to escape, but to breathe. The town was understated, elegant without trying too hard. Stone streets still cool from the night, cafes just opening, the smell of bread and espresso drifting through the air. We walked side by side, close enough that our arms brushed occasionally. This time, neither of us pretended not to notice. "You don't look like someone who just changed her life," she said lightly. "I feel like someone who stopped running," I replied. She glanced at me then, something warm and thoughtful in her expression. "That's usually quieter than people expect." We sat at a small cafe near the water. No staff hovering, no curated privacy, just two women at a table, sunlight catching in the rim of our cups. The normalcy felt intimate in a different way, exposing, grounding. I noticed how often her gaze returned to me, not possessive, just attentive, as if she were recalibrating, learning how to be present without managing. "I don't know how to do this without structures," she admitted after a while. "Schedules, roles, clear definitions." I smiled softly. "Neither do I, but I know how to listen, and how to leave if I'm not seen." Her hand rested near mine on the table, close but not touching. "I see you," she said simply. No flourish, no promise layered with expectation. That mattered more than anything else she could have offered. Back on the yacht later, the air felt different, less charged, more intimate. We moved through shared spaces without the careful choreography of before. Still restrained, still aware, but no longer pretending this was temporary. In the late afternoon, we sat on the deck, the sun warm against our skin, the sea stretching endlessly ahead. She reached for my hand then, slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I didn't. Her fingers closed around mine, steady and sure. The contact wasn't electric anymore. It was grounding. It felt like trust taking its first real breath. "I don't want this to be a transaction," she said quietly. "It isn't," I replied. "Not anymore." The words settled easily between us. No need to test them. That night we shared dinner alone, no music, no agenda. Conversation drifted and deepened, moving through laughter and quiet confessions. When the evening ended, we stood near the doorway to her cabin, the air thick with things unsaid. She didn't reach for me. She didn't need to. "Tomorrow will be complicated," she said. "Then we'll take it slowly," I replied. Her smile was soft, genuine. "I'd like that." I returned to my cabin alone, heart steady, thoughts clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the end of something. I wasn't calculating exits or rehearsing detachment. I was staying. Not because I was paid, not because I was asked, but because, somewhere between 7 days and one quiet decision, I had remembered what it felt like to choose myself, and to let someone choose me back. And I knew, with a calm certainty that didn't need drama to validate it, that whatever came next would change us both. The 9th day didn't arrive on a calendar. It arrived in practice, in the way we negotiated space, in the way mornings unfolded without scripts. I woke to the sound of movement on the deck, and the smell of coffee drifting down the corridor. For a moment, I waited for the old reflex, the urge to assess, to plan my exit. It didn't come. Victoria was already outside when I joined her, hair still damp, a sweater pulled on like an afterthought. She handed me a cup without asking how I took it. She'd learned. The ease of that knowledge settled something deep in my chest. We talked about logistics, about what staying actually meant. She had meetings to attend, calls she couldn't cancel forever, commitments that followed her like shadows. I had a life that needed tending to, loose ends that wouldn't tie themselves. The conversation was careful, not heavy. We weren't negotiating ownership. We were mapping reality. "I don't want to absorb you into my world," she said at one point. "And I don't want to step into yours without permission." "That's the first time anyone's ever said that to me," I replied. She nodded. "I'm learning." So was I. Learning that closeness didn't have to erase edges, that intimacy could widen you instead of narrowing your options. We decided small things first. Time frames, boundaries, ways to communicate when distance became necessary. It felt unromantic in the best way. Grounded, respectful. Later, we took the yacht out again, just far enough to feel movement, not escape. The water was calm, the sky open. I lay on the deck, eyes closed, listening to the rhythm beneath me. Victoria sat nearby, reading, her presence steady. Occasionally, she'd glance up to check on me. Not possessive, considerate. At some point, she reached out and traced a small circle on my wrist with her thumb, absent-minded, intimate without ceremony. I opened my eyes and met her gaze. There was no urgency there, just connection. "You're here," she said softly. "I am," I answered, and I meant more than location. As evening approached, the conversation turned inward. She spoke about pressure, the kind that builds quietly, the expectation to always know, always lead. I spoke about invisibility, about how easy it had been to become useful instead of known. We listened without interruption, the way people do when they trust the silence to hold what words can't. "I don't want to repeat old patterns," she said. "Then let's notice them," I replied. "Together." She smiled then, a small, genuine curve of her mouth. "That sounds doable." That night, when we stood again outside her cabin, the moment felt different than before. Less charged with restraint, more shaped by intention. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't need to. I kissed her cheek. Slow, deliberate, a promise without spectacle. She closed her eyes briefly, breathing in. "Tomorrow," she said, not as a warning, but as a horizon. "Tomorrow," I echoed. I returned to my cabin with a sense of quiet anticipation, not for an ending, but for continuity. Whatever this was becoming, it was no longer fragile. It had weight, direction. 9 days in, and for the first time, the future didn't feel like something happening to me. It felt like something we were choosing, carefully, consciously, one honest moment at a time. The 10th day felt less like a conclusion, and more like a threshold. Morning came gently, light filtering through the windows in a way that felt intentional, as if the world were offering permission. I woke with clarity instead of urgency. No countdown, no rehearsed goodbyes, just the quiet knowledge that whatever happened next would be shaped by choice, not avoidance. Victoria was already awake. I found her in the lounge, barefoot, jacket draped over a chair, phone face down on the table. She looked up when I entered, her expression open, unguarded in a way that no headline could capture. She didn't speak right away, neither did I. We had learned the value of that pause. "I canceled Paris," she said finally. I studied her face, not for sacrifice, not for regret. "For how long?" "For now," she replied. "Long enough to see what happens when I don't outrun something important." The honesty in her voice settled between us, steady and calm. I nodded, feeling the shape of my own truth align with hers. "I need to go back," I said. "Not to leave, to return to my life, to close things properly." She didn't flinch. "I expected that. And I need to know," I added, choosing the words carefully. "That staying doesn't mean disappearing into you." She smiled, soft, knowing, "It won't," she said. "Not if I'm doing this right." We spent the morning talking through realities instead of fantasies, schedules, distance. The logistics of two lives learning to intersect without collapse. It wasn't romantic in the way movies promise. It was better. It was respect dressed as patience. Later we walked the deck together, the sea wide and calm, the yacht moving with quiet purpose. She stopped near the railing and turned to face me fully. The wind lifted her hair, sunlight catching in her eyes. "I don't want to own this," she said. "I want to build it." The simplicity of the statement moved me more than grand declarations ever had. I stepped closer, resting my hand against her arm, not clinging, not cautious. Present. "So do I," I said. When it was time, we didn't rush. The crew waited discreetly. My suitcase stood by the door again, lighter this time somehow. Victoria walked me to the dock, our steps unhurried. The marina hummed with ordinary life, boats coming and going, people wrapped in their own beginnings and endings. We stopped at the edge. She didn't pull me close. She didn't ask for promises. She met my gaze and held it. "This isn't goodbye," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's alignment." I kissed her then, brief, intentional, full of everything we weren't trying to prove. When we pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine for a moment, breathing me in like a memory she planned to keep active. "I'll see you soon," she said. "I know," I replied. I walked away without looking back, not because I needed distance, but because I trusted what we'd built enough to let it stand on its own. As the yacht receded behind me, I felt no ache, just a steady warmth, a sense of direction. 7 days had brought me to her. 10 had taught me how to stay without losing myself. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a gamble. It felt like an invitation we had both learned how to accept.